everybody. My name is Amuli Ofuani Sokolo. I am a teacher. I'm a lecturer at the University of Benin. I'm an associate professor of law, and I teach gender and human rights. So my focus of research is human rights, but I also teach the intersection between gender and human rights. I think hence my presence here. And today I'll be talking about gender, climate change, and community mobilization as part of the Asunize and Organize movement we're trying to do. Sorry. Okay. So as a teacher, I always like to talk about the concepts before I start. I don't like to assume that people know what we are talking about. So I'm going to start. There are three components of my presentation. We're talking about climate change, we're talking about gender, and community mobilization. So what is climate change? It's a long-term shift in weather patterns, global temperature, and is usually caused by human activities, mainly burning of fossil fuels like gas, natural gas, oil, coal. And of course, we have talked about deforestation and of course the impact of industries on the economy, like the oil industry. So that's what causes climate change. It's global temperature increase, changing the weather patterns, and we are seeing it in Nigeria. What is gender? Gender is not biology. We're not talking about man and woman. It goes beyond I'm a man and I'm a woman. It is how a person wants to identify in society. And then of course these roles society assigned to women. We've had a president say the role of women is in the other room. That is what he believes gender is to be. So that women, and traditionally that's the assumption. A woman's place is what? A teacher. And I had a lady say she doesn't want to have children. And people were like, God forbid, but that's her choice. She doesn't want to have, that is, but gender, our community and our roles don't expect that women should be mothers in the kitchen. And this person says she doesn't have a mothering spirit, a mothering bone in her body. She doesn't want children, and yet society expects her to have. So it's just roles that are assigned, expectations and roles that are assigned to people. And then sometimes identities persons want to, assume. I don't want to go into the LGBTQ, but there are women who now want to assume the identity of men, and vice versa. It's happening in Africa. It's happening in Nigeria. We know Bobrisky, so I don't want to go into that. And then what is community mobilization? Just you and I coming together. All of us coming together to solve problems. And in the climate change context, providing solutions, inclusive solutions to counter the effects of climate change. So how do we connect these three? What's the connecting factor between gender, climate change, and community mobilization? What is the connection? We know that climate change affects natural resources. I mean, we have watched videos. They affect how people earn their livelihoods. Of course, food scarcity, food security, health, and so on. So it creates vulnerabilities and instability. And who are the people? It affects men and women, but women bear the brunt of climate change-induced actions. And then, of course, we know that community mobilization is very important to address these issues, to mitigate climate change, to address climate change, and then to, of course, influence how people cope, to provide strategies on how people can cope with these climate-induced problems. So it's very important, extremely important, to apply a gender lens to climate change. And if you were watching the video, a woman highlighted that women are excluded when it comes to policy making and dialoguing, and that's what we are talking about. That's what I'm here to talk about. I had prepared an activity, but we can't do that now. So Um, okay, so climate change is real in Nigeria. We have seen the videos. But there are still people that don't believe. I was talking to somebody recently when I was engaged to, when I was told to talk about this topic. And he saw me reading an article and a report that was done about climate change and gender defects in Nigeria. And he told me, a man, and he said, you are buying into the European concept that there's climate change. There is nothing like climate change. And I was like, were you in Nigeria last year? You know what I'm referring to last year? The UN Sustainable Development Report of July 2025 highlighted that 2024 was the highest year, was the hottest year in the longest, and the CO2 emissions that were generated in 2024, highest in 2,000 years. That's just to show you that these things are happening. There's climate change and it is impacted. I remember last year I was feeling like the sky wanted to fall on me. It was really extremely hot, not just in Nigeria, all over the world. And weather patterns changed. Remember, even now we're having rains when rains should not fall. And you know the impact. When people should farm, you cannot farm. So that is, it's a reality that is on ground. So climate change, but I'm not going to go into the impacts of climate change because a lot of my previous presenters have done justice to that. So we are now going to look at, I want to now highlight the gendered impact. What are the impacts of climate change on gender? So climate change affects everybody, so let's not get it wrong. It affects men, it affects women, it affects children. But what we are saying is that it affects women disproportionately because of the kind of livelihoods women engage in. We know that when men, climate change affects them, they migrate to the city to go and earn money. Who did they leave back behind most times? Women. So climate change affects everybody, but everybody experiences climate change differently. The way I experience climate change is different from the way you will experience climate change. And then it's different from the way another woman will experience climate change. So I always talk about intersectionalities. When we're talking about intersectionalities, we're talking about different identities, different power structures, laws. How do they affect persons, and of course, specifically women? So a woman can be poor, she can be disabled, she can be in a rural area, right? And she can be in a rural area that is experiencing high climate change effect. Will she be experiencing the same? Will she be experiencing the same? Will her experiences, be the same as a woman in Benin City, for instance, working in an office, living in AC? Let me use myself as, for instance, would my experiences as I am in my office in Unibed, will I teaching? I don't have AC lecture theater, so let's not even go there. But at least I have AC in my office. So 90% of the time, I spend my time in my office, right, researching. So if I'm in my office, am I experiencing the same? I'm a woman, right? But am I experiencing the same thing as a woman in a rural community who is disabled, who is a person with disability, who is a woman with disability? Whether she's hearing impaired, whether she's visually impaired, whether she's physically impaired. And each of them even have their different disabilities, even have their different experiences. Then she's in the rural community. Then she is poor because climate change has affected her source of livelihood. Is she going to have the same experiences as me? No. So we are going to be looking at, so women contribute least. Am I lying? Do women contribute least to climate change? We are not the ones that are driving the big vehicles. We are not the ones that are in the oil companies. The representation of women in oil companies, poor. In most socioeconomic climes, women are poorly represented. So they are I'm not saying we don't contribute, but they contribute least, very minimal to climate change, and yet they bear the brunt. So what are the socioeconomic impacts of climate change on women? According to the African Development Bank, women make up 70% of agricultural workforce in Nigeria. Subsistence farming. Most women are engage in subsistence agriculture, fishing, farming, wood gathering. All these things require you being outside and experiencing the impact of climate change. And then, according to the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, they said that 75% of the subsistence farming population in Nigeria are women. So you know that many women are the ones that do cassava. They are the ones that fish. We had women talking in the video talking about gathering periwinkle, crab, women. Frying gari. Where do they fry gari? Under the sun, women. You know, so that's what we are talking about. And then, because of, as we saw and have heard, because of these things threatening their livelihood, they can't fish anymore. Lands have been polluted. Climate change is even affecting it. When women farm sometimes, because of too much heat, I saw that my dad is a farmer. My dad is a professor and he was a farmer. I fried gari as a young girl. You know, so I know what it is like to harvest the whole process, because my dad had 2 big farms, because he was the breadwinner of a large family. And I've seen where you see crops rotting in the ground because of temperature. And that affects women's livelihood, because they're the ones who are involved in these things. Sometimes corn turn to dry flakes. And then because of irregular rain, sometimes we can't plant when we want to plant. And so when they are supposed to, maybe a woman knows she earns some money from corn at a particular time, because of the change in weather, she cannot. What happens? Her livelihood is, and then we are having more and more women-led homes, where women are the breadwinners, more and more. Gone are the days where it was men who were. We have a lot of women-led homes currently in Nigeria. Research has shown that. And even the census. There's a research we are doing, and I was surprised to find out that we have a lot of women even earning more than their husbands right now. And so, you know, the dialogue and the narrative is changing, right? So we know that climate change also makes food inaccessible. It affects food security. You heard that woman saying, how will we eat when we don't have money to buy food? It is a reality. And most women will sacrifice food for their children. You know that mothering spirit. We will sacrifice food for their husbands and family. Go hungry so that their families can eat. And that also has health impact, especially when they are in their reproductive health. What about the safety impact of climate change? Because of climate change and because of poverty that is associated with climate change, a lot of people are migrating. We have talked about communities being displaced. It's a reality in Nigeria. And so as competition for scarce resources increases, migration, increases. And then there's what? Increase in crime. Who bears the brunt of crime? Women. Gender-based violence. I will come to that when I'm looking at health impact. So these are things that affect women. What about the health impacts on women? Research shows, a UN research shows that women are 14 times more likely to die from extreme weather conditions caused by climate change. 14 times more likely than men. Why?
Yes, ma'am.
And in Nigeria, the report I was talking about talked about the fact that 62% of persons died from flooding. That flooding that happened in 2022, who can remember? When some of us, my husband is from, my family home is in Port Harcourt, and I remember I couldn't travel to Port Harcourt because of the flooding that happened. And now, our comrade highlighted that traveling to Port Harcourt, I have to prepare myself mentally and emotionally to go on the road because we don't have flights. And even if there are flights, they're expensive, but there are no flights. So when I'm traveling to Port Harcourt, in as much as I leave at 6, sometimes I don't get into my house in Port Harcourt until 7, 8 at night, depending on when you're going. And if rain falls, times 2 is a double, and I travel with a little, I have a toddler son. So imagine how uncomfortable it is to travel with a toddler son, and you are spending the whole day on the road. And I remember when I just married, traveling to Port Harcourt was a breeze. When I go with my private car, 3 hours. When I go with the public transport, 4 or 5 hours, depending. So it just shows you that the impact of climate change, flooding, the roads are usually inaccessible. These are reality the flood will come and it takes them. I watched a video some time ago of the flooding in Benin. It was children. Flooding carries children a lot in Benin. And so imagine women, we're not talking of small flood in your house, so we're talking of, you're just seeing water moving. Women, then heat waves. The study also showed that women are more likely to die from heat waves than men because they have, especially if they are pregnant, they are lactating, double jeopardy. So that is the impact. Then they are more likely to be injured. So if they don't die, they are more likely to be injured during such events. Flooding, if a woman can hang on to a tree, but she will first be used as a punching bag first before she survives. Then we are seeing impact of extreme heat. Incidents in the birth of childbirth, stillbirth. You know what stillbirth is? The child dies in your womb. Women are experiencing it because of extreme heat. The extreme heat waves that are occurring. In Nigeria, hypertension is on the increase for women. Fatigue. Why fatigue? She will do hard. If she's a career woman, she will do career things. She will come home. If she's a working woman, whether she's not a career, because I believe a career woman is any woman who earns a livelihood, whether she's farming or fishing. So after fishing and farming, she will come home and come and cook, take care of children, clean house, and then of course perform her other duties as well. So all these things, fatigue, right? Then we are having the increase in vector spread diseases. All these things, diseases are spread by insects, vectors. Malaria is on the increase. Who does it affect? Women and children. So girls, right? And then we have dengue fever. You just notice this. You just see new vector-borne diseases on the increase. But Zika virus was the one that was not discussed recently. So they are on the increase, and of course the impact on women, especially the women who are pregnant, impacts on them more. Then increase in heat-prone diseases like meningitis, particularly in the north. It's in the increase. It occurs everywhere, but more statistics show that it is more in the north. But it happens meningitis and then respiratory diseases. Who will it affect more? Women and children. So when we are talking about intersectionality, how it affects different, okay, I'll get there. Then of course, gender-based violence is on the increase. Once there is displacement, I agree, but see, I started with the fact that climate change affects both men and women. But women, who is more likely to be sexually abused? Women. Who is more likely to be physically abused?
Men.
So there is a new debate about men being, and I don't doubt it, and I don't undermine the fact that men are being physically assaulted by women. I mean, I agree. But we have to agree that women are the ones who are more likely to be physically subject to domestic abuse. Who is more likely to be trafficked?
Men.
Who is more likely to be trafficked and exploited?
Men.
Women and girls. Young girls, of course.
6 months more has boy. Akman na woman.
Akman
na woman.
Yes, sir.
We have had more no from women, and no is injustice to the men.
Thank you.
When you say no, that is an emotional trauma to the men.
That's another discussion for another day. And then we know that the
men are more
consumption
victim of torture.
Contaminated water
Men
also
are more
has its
victim of
health
torture.
risk, right? Contamination.
So when the man comes to the yard, men are more victim.
That was really
Yes.
that was an interesting point, right? And of course, we know that there are cultural factors and social-cultural factors, economic factors that are already in place that already disenfranchise women. Recent studies by the National Bureau of Statistics show that about 94% of men are represented in Nigerian parliament. So our state government, you can count. How many women do you see in the House of Assembly? Let's not even go to National Assembly. And then I don't like to, because it's a debate. When you talk about what happened to Natasha, it becomes a, but I felt that matter was handled poorly. We investigate. wait first before you go. But you see, and then they now further disenfranchise women by removing, by suspending her. When they were only for how many women in the whole of national? So are you saying women are not competent to lead? That is the question.
Now contest now.
Don't we have women who are educated,
they
even in
don't share
academia? That is those days.
They look for.
My mother is always proud to tell me
They look for
that when he was looking for children, he was very, very happy to have a girl. And my name reflects it all.
How many men are in teaching profession?
How many men?
And
Nurse.
I'm not joking. I think he empowered my sister and I more than my brothers. He schooled outside the country. My brothers schooled
Now
here.
politics that they talk of gender.
From day one, he always taught me to be confident. Because you are a woman doesn't make you less. So, you understand what I'm saying? And the funny thing, because I just want to address that before I move on, who takes care of their fathers?
Men.
So, most of the time, I agree that there are men that take
Now
care
our
of their
wife
women.
now.
My father still calls me sometimes to tell me he wants to eat. My father is in Benin, my dad is a retired professor. And sometimes I move to their house. Mama knows me very well. I spend a month in their house. My neighbors will be calling me, you travel? I say, no, I did Benin. I did my papa's house. I go to cook for my father. And I'm still the one he calls when he wants to make some of his favorite food. He has my mom, and I always tell him, my mom is old, so I step in. My brother, I used to have 2 brothers in Benin. Now I still have 1 brother, but when it comes to those kind of things, even when their gas finished day before yesterday, they called me rather than call my brother. And I was teaching when my mother's call was coming. Like 10 missed calls, and I took it. Gas has finished to come. I said, Mommy, I'm in class. She now said, okay, when you finish. My brother me and my brother work in the same universe. That is the interesting fact. It is when you over me, when I say, okay, I don't want to do that, they will not call my brother. So I'm not saying it's not only male. I still sometimes call mechanic for my father. My brother is there. Because so that responsibility, and he has, my father has always regarded me as his first child, not his first daughter. So he gives me that. I get all the responsibility of being a first child, not just a first daughter. So it's not the daughter thing. It's because I'm his first child. When my younger brother was getting married, I like to tell stories. Forgive me, and my students will be able to attest to that. I sat in the parlor with my father. I was the one that held the money, and some of our kinspeople were angry on behalf of my younger brother, who is number 3. There's a girl after, the 2 girls are first, and they were saying, "Is the man that is supposed to be there?" And my father asked a simple question: "Who is my first child?" I was there when I saw everything. My brother is the first son, and I give him the respect. But I'm also his elder sister, and I don't fail to remind him that I senior you. So you understand what? And that is the
Western culture.
Why am I saying all this? Because when we are talking about community action, you have to think about how do you think about women? How do you involve women? It starts from the family. It starts from the family before it goes to society and it climbs higher. If you don't regard your female children as anybody, people will not. And that is why women keep being excluded in important things, even in academia. Before they will consider us for positions, we have to prove ourselves over and over. As in, sometimes we are 3 times better than the men, so that we can be considered. And that's the truth. In academia, because I can speak for where I am from. Okay, so we know that socioeconomic factors, women are poorer, women are likely to be in subsistent informal jobs than formal jobs. Women are excluded from the political political sphere. They just do it, they give us as a, how do I put it now? I hate that word affirmative action, personally. Because it doesn't capture, it's a right thing. It is not an affirmative action thing. And when they are even doing the affirmative action, they don't give qualified women. They give women, wives of their colleagues, It becomes a very, very, how do I put it now? It is not done fairly. And so I'm not a fan of affirmative action. I prefer rights-based action, where I say that, okay, both of us are standing on an equal base. Judge me because I always tell women, even when I work with women, I'm not going to give you special treatment because you're a woman. You have to prove yourself.
That is it.
And women, this is a call to you. Wherever you are, prove yourself. Because some women like to use affirmative action satisfaction to be lazy. And I'm a woman, so I'm a woman.
3-0 for you.
You don't want to, when you are pregnant.
One native here.
Of course, there are women who have difficult pregnancies, but many women like to use this female. I had a colleague say she's not coming to work because she was on her period, and I was like, were you hospitalized? Do you have serious? Yes. So some women like to use women issues to avoid work, and that is why they will not take us seriously, right? So because of traditional gender roles, lack of decisional making capacities, women are excluded from the table. So when we are looking at gender and intersectional approaches, I've chosen 3 groups of women. There are many groups, but I chose to focus on rural women because most communities in Nigeria, most rural communities in Nigeria are located in ecological hotspots. Whether you are looking at the coastal plains, Benue, Middle East, you are looking at the north, desertification and deforestation that is happening there, or you are looking at the south, flooding, and of course all the impacts of gas flaring and whatnot. And then the interesting thing is that they work on land. They often depend on the land, but they rarely earn land. In my area, a woman cannot own land. She cannot inherit land. How many women can inherit land in traditional African societies? But yet, they are the ones that work more on the land. So those are things. And then, of course, like I said earlier, they depend on climate sensitive livelihoods, farming, water collection, wood collection. And so they are affected by impacts of climate change. Then food security is added to it, and then of course impact on their livelihood. Women and girls with disabilities. Women and girls, this is a very passionate topic of mine. My PhD is on disability rights. And women with disabilities are often excluded from land inheritance, employment, right? Even education. Parents do not want to send children with disabilities, particularly if there's a choice, they rather send boys with disabilities over women with disabilities. So that's it. And then, of course, there's additional mobility barriers, informational barriers for hearing impaired persons, restriction in access to service, and of course, they can't access things like warning signs when they happen in society. And internally displaced women. We have a lot of IDPs in Nigeria, and there are women in there. And first of all, overcrowding is a problem because overcrowding also comes with diseases, and women are more prone, to diseases than men. And then, of course, we know that in the IDPs there have been a lot of reports of sexual violence in IDPs, even by people that are meant to protect. There was one by Amnesty International about women in the IDPs being exploited by soldiers who were supposed to be protecting them. So that is a fact. And then we know that many IDPs are usually put in peripheries, open land, abandoned schools where climate resilience structures. So those are some of the issues. So why is it important? Because when we want to talk about climate adaptation and mitigation, it takes a village. We have talked about it's a collective effort. And if it's a collective effort, it means that it's not just women. That's the idea I want to raise. It takes men, women, youth, and even children for climate mitigation and adaptation. And of course, it should involve grassroots initiatives from grassroots. And of course, we must include traditional knowledge bases when we are talking about climate change. And then, of course, it must be gender inclusive. That's what I've just said, include everybody. And then one of the things, even when we are talking about gender inclusion in Nigeria, one of the things we fail to take into consideration when we are looking at solutions is intersectionality. We would like to do a one-size-fits approach, and it can't work. There are men with disabilities and there are also women with disabilities. So you have to take into consideration all these things if you want effective climate community-based mobilization. It's a very important fact. And then what does it include? Tree planting. It's not just when I started researching on tree planting, it was interesting to know that it's not just any tree you plant. Some trees damage the ecology. So and then it's always better to plant indigenous trees indigenous to that area. Iroko, we have mahogany, all those are our indigenous trees. Waste management, local water conservation. And women are usually the ones that are involved in some of these things. They've already developed things. All those irrigation things that women do to, when they put small sand in the, because my husband is from the riverine area. And when they put all those, there's something like sand to gather fish and clams and all those things. They are the ones that know how, even in this, even with climate change effects, they are the ones that usually are the ones that, carry out those activities. So it is very important to include those knowledge bases, because, and then women are extremely resilient. True or false? Women are very, very resilient and more adaptive than men. Very true. So if you want a good climate change community mobilization, you have to include women. And then women are usually the ones involved in early warning systems. They are the ones that shout. If they come, when they, true or false? So even when we are doing these warning systems, we also have to be intersectional. Maybe for hearing impaired people, we find ways to, maybe flags of one color or a cloth of one color, so that they understand that there's impact of something coming. And then you have to carry along everybody, different people, poor people, let it not be for only rich people. We watch films where we see, I don't know whether you're a film buff like me, where you see when there's going to be a disaster, and then all the rich people will go and buy one jet, or they will build a bunker. Why is it always rich people that, in the films, when you look at all these disaster movies, it's always rich people that are buying bunks underneath the ground because they built it and they sold it for, they don't include poor people. Okay, so we have a lot of challenges. I've highlighted some of them in my talk already. Sociocultural barriers. Funding is very limited, and money is very important. Whether we like it or not, if you want to have effective community mobilization, money is very important. We have gender blind laws. I was going through the Climate Change Act, and you don't find, it's not inclusive, it's not disability inclusive, and then it's very, it's not gender blind as far as I'm concerned. So we have gender blind policies. They don't capture women. Poor awareness. Somebody was asking what do we do, and I said dialogue, make noise. HOMEF is always talking about posting things on social media, talking to people. As a teacher, when I teach my students, I try to, even when it's not gender and human rights, I try to bring some of these things to their knowledge. I try to practicalize it when I'm teaching law, so that they can have it in their minds. And then I engage my colleagues. Recently, I did a research, it's still ongoing, on accessibility, and I engaged my young colleagues. And one of them confessed that some of the things that came out from him, he had never, because the research is on persons with disabilities, and he said he had never thought of some of these issues. So if you don't engage people, some people say we are talking. I think talking brings further talking, and then it may be trickles of change, but it's still change all the same. People have to be aware. Somebody was telling me climate change is not real. So if people still believe climate change is not real, how do you now, do they know about climate change? Do they know about the mitigation? So that's why we have to talk and convince them as best as we could about the climate change impact. And then we have our policies. One of the problems in Nigeria is fragmentation. Ministry of Women Affairs, we deal with women issues. So if we are talking of climate change, we cannot deal with Ministry of Environment. Women Day, why can't one ministry or one parastatal deal with issues? We have fragmentation. 10 ministries doing the same thing, and that's a big problem.
Yes.
It's time wasting, it's money wasting, because everybody wants to chop. They want money. So we have to find ways to decrease, I think, through law, fragmentation, where several units and I'm trying to round up are doing the same thing. Limited access to technology is a problem. Somebody was indicting lecturers, and I was telling him, I'm a lecturer, I will defend our position. A professor earns 468,000. That is why we went on strike. 468,000. If you don't get private funding, how are you going to do research that is impactful? How do you develop technology? That we have beautiful minds, and that is why many of them are running away. Last year alone, I lost 6 colleagues, brilliant colleagues, because in the academia we recruit from 2-1 first class. Many of them are running away because they can't do impactful research. If you want to do your research, you spend your money. When I did my PhD research, I spent as a student, and I was just a lecturer, an assistant, no, a lecturer one then. I spent over $1 million doing my research. I funded it myself with my family. Nobody, government did not give me 1 naira. I applied for TED fund, which lecturers should get. I didn't get it. So it is a problem. And then, of course, sometimes survival needs outweigh long term. People are hungry, and you're telling them not to cut down tree to bonfire. You're telling them not to. You understand? I'm not saying it's justifiable, but it's a reality. So we have to have impactful social development, plans. Government. I don't know whether they are government officials here, but they need to know, and they need to take it back to the government that you have to have socio-economic policies that impact on people if we are going to drive any change, not just climate change, any change. Because if people are hungry, they will go and cut down food to eat. They will burn forests because they want to hunt animals and so on and so forth. And then they will receive bribe from the so-called violators because they are hungry. Nobody wants their community to die. But when they are hungry, that 10,000 naira is life-saving for them. And so they will betray their community for that point, saying, man must work first, community later. That is the truth. And that's what happens.
Survival instinct.
So what do we do? What's the way forward? What are the strategies? I've said some of them. We must mainstream gender and climate policies. We must bring men and women and different groups of men and women to the table, and even children, because it starts from not just you, children. And how do we? Okay, I'll come to that. So you must take intersectionality into consideration. Capacity building. We already do. HOMEF is doing that already, but we need to do more. Education. We can start. When I was in school, there was conservation club, headed by my teacher is late now, Mrs. Etiobo, and we used to sing "Conserve the World," So at an early age, I knew what conservation was, which induced my desire to study environment. My master's was in environmental law. I did my master's in environmental law. Marine and environmental law. So it was a mix between, I wanted to understand the impact of climate on water, and then environmental oil. So it's because of that conservation club I joined. And we used to act drama. I remember we did a drama about white-throated monkey. So it shows you the importance of all these things. So when you are doing capacity building, it's not just coming to speak big English. I don't know how to speak pidgin very well, but I'm learning because I've realized that when you are trying to dialogue with local communities, you have to translate it to the local consciousness of the people. I cannot go to Igbo land and I'll be saying climate change. They will just look at me. But if I speak my language, I'm from Delta Igbo, or you speak pidgin, it makes sense to them. So you have to translate it, and then through plays, through storytelling. That is how you do it. We're talking about Ogonized and Yasunized. And storytelling, it was very interesting when I came the last time to hear about the Yasuni people in Ecuador. I had never heard about it, and it was interesting. And now, I'm even telling people about it. Of course, we know about Ogoni, and we like to use it as an example for, when you're talking about freedom fighting, when it comes to in terms of environmental justice. So these are important. You must translate it. When you're doing capacity building and education, you must translate it to the local consciousness of the people. I'm taking my strategies and providing recommendations, so I don't have to go to recommendations. Then we talked about funding being a problem. You must support women's access to land. Many women don't have access to land. You will find out that women even have landlords, sometimes who are draconian. They go to harvest. Some women's work is to go and harvest palm tree from somebody's farm, right? And sell. And then the man will say, 50% of your profit is mine. Exploitation that I talked about. Exploitation is not only sexual exploitation, financial exploitation. So when you provide support, recently, my uncle is a farmer in Delta State, and he said there was this intervention. They said they were giving palm seedlings to farmers. And he came down to Benin. My father signed as guarantor. And when he got to the ministry that was supplying it, something interesting happened. They offered him 40,000 naira. They say, see your seedling. But what you want is until do. We will give you the money, 40,000 naira. And he said, no. I'm a farmer. I want to plant it. Where I am, we already have palm trees. I want to reinforce. He was frustrated for more than 2 months. They didn't give him those seedlings. He took intervention. He took a call to somebody who knew somebody before they released his seedlings. And with insults, you still say you too know. That's what happens. Sometimes these initiatives, when government provides them, the workers there sabotage. Yes. And so we must find ways, access to finance, access to technology, and then report. Don't be afraid to make reports. Some of us are afraid of authority, and you should know your rights as people, and you should be able to fight for your rights. They say they are giving you something, empowering you to farm. If they give you 40,000 tomorrow, is it going to produce palm fruit for you in the next couple of years? No, and you know what palm fruit is? Palm tree does not die. The palm tree in my father's compound since I was a child, we still are harvesting it today. That's why it's one of the most resilient trees to plant when you're talking of climate mitigation. And then, of course, it is very important to strengthen local grassroots organizations. Women cooperatives, they are very strong. Women are mafia in anywhere you go. Where do you see? In church, who are more? If a church is going to succeed, who is going to drive that church? If any initiative, because men talk and they get tired, women, we have power to fight. And that's the truth. So for any local grassroots, initiative to survive, you need women. So both men and women, because each of them play their role. Men have their role, women play their role. But excluding women, when you're talking about grassroots organization and local governance, we have market leaders. Don't they play very important roles? We have farming leaders. Don't they play very important? So why don't you engage those people? If we do that, some of these things we are talking about will not just be on paper anymore. They will be in principle. They will be, actualized. That's the truth. And then when we are talking about gender inclusive community mobilization, there are some principles I just want to highlight.
Thank you very much.
That is why we have